Let's do it. First news story. Oh, I didn't mean to take a screenshot of this one. Here we go.
So of course, in classic DSP fashion, we can't have anything ready to go and we can't have any visuals prepared for our visual style stream. Instead, we're going to just have a bunch of screenshots of Twitter that we took on our phone, and that's what we're going to go off of. Sound good? Sounds good to me. And by the way, Cat agrees.
Are you ready for this? Let's talk about this one first before we get to the big story, because this is a good story to talk about. So, how many people out there knew that last year EA, Electronic Arts, released a game that had a budget of $125 million that was a AAA single-player shooter with RPG elements? Did you know that this game was released last year and existed?
Well, going just based off of this information, DSP, I'm going to be honest with you, I have no idea what game you're talking about. Because I don't honestly know about any game's budget, because it doesn't matter to me. I don't care how much people spend making a video game. I don't care how much they make back, in all honesty. As long as the game is good, I really don't care. You also mentioned that it was made by Electronic Arts, and honestly, at this point, I write off pretty much every Electronic Arts game that comes out. As a firm PC user, you cannot make me use EA Play or Origin or whatever third-party launcher they want me to use. It's just not going to happen. I just won't play your games. And that goes for any publisher at this point. If you require a third-party launcher, get fucked. But please get to the point of what you're trying to say, DSP. Why do you insist on wasting all of this oxygen just so that you can hear yourself talk, and in turn waste all of your viewers' time?
Did you also know that the game monstrously flopped and that no one bought it? And did you know that now, because of that, okay, for some reason, okay, EA is using this as a scapegoat or straw man, and what they're saying is, this is our evidence that these single player games just don't work anymore, and therefore we're pushing this in a different direction, and we're going to focus more on games with microtransactions and live service, because this is our evidence that single player is not the future anymore.
I want to make it very clear that scapegoat and strawman are not the same thing at all, DSP. You really can't conflate the two. I know you don't have the best grasp of what words mean, so I'm just informing you. There's no salt here. And of course, DSP jumps to the extreme that nobody bought the game. And because he hasn't told us exactly what game he's talking about yet, I cannot look up how many units it sold. I mean, I could because I pre-watched this, but that would ruin the timeline. But I highly doubt that the game sold literally 0 copies. That's not possible. Not for an EA title. And this is why I wish that he had visuals prepared on his OBS for segments like this, because I want to see the exact wording for whatever tweet or article that he's looking at on his phone right now. But because I can't see the exact wording, I'm gonna have to try and be generous to DSP here and say that is the stance that they're taking. They said that this game, whatever game this is, didn't sell well, and in turn they're going to focus more on multiplayer live service style microtransaction filled games. And like I said, this is us trying to be generous. This is me giving him the benefit of the doubt, because even if that's the exact wording of whatever he's looking at, are we really gonna sit here and act surprised that this is a stance that EA could be taking? It is Electronic Arts that we're talking about. They're known for their shitty business practices, no? They're pretty much the kings of DLC and pushing out live service games that don't need to exist. And that's before even talking about all of the microtransactions that get put into all of their games so that they can take every last penny that you have in the smallest increments possible. But to get back on track, yes, there is less money in single player games typically, because you can't sell people a single player game and then add a bunch of shit that they have to buy later. I mean, you can in the form of DLC, but microtransactions and battle passes, not so much, or you're just making a bad single player game that nobody is going to want to play. To me, the next logical step after you make a successful single player game is to make another single player game that is also good. But at this point in the modern video games industry, these companies aren't interested in doing that. They want your money, they don't want to make games. Similar to how DSP doesn't want to play them. But he still hasn't told us the name of the game yet.
Now you might be saying, wait, what? Like, what are you even talking about? Right? Like, what that didn't happen. You made that up, right? No, it actually happened. The name of the game, for those who don't know, was called Immortals of Aveum.
There we go, Immortals of Aveum. It looks like this. This is what it looks like. Yeah, I remember seeing gameplay of that on the DSP React stream, and that was the first time and only time I'd ever really heard about the game. Very cool.
Okay? I remember seeing like a clip of this game. It was on the Summer Game Fest, and I don't remember if it was actually last year or the year before. And I remember what the game looked like was basically first person, like Hexen upgraded. Did you ever see Hexen? Probably not. Most of you are probably not of my age range.
Does he think that you have to be a certain age to have seen some of these retro style games? Because I can tell you right now, I'm not DSP's age, far from it in fact, and I've seen Hexen. Hell, I've even played Hexen. You don't actually have to be a boomer to play boomer shooters or even see boomer shooters. But this is kind of a flip-flop for DSP because he's told us several times that there's more 30 to 40-year-olds watching his streams and his content than anybody that's under the age of 18. How can that be true when simultaneously he's sitting here trying to tell us that most of the people in the chat right now aren't going to know what he's talking about when he's talking about Hexen because they've never seen it? We as detractors are all well aware that the only people that DSP actually caters to is children. And that's only because they're ignorant and don't understand that they're being taken advantage of by a 41-year-old with no positive aspects. And anybody who's not a child is just severely dented. I just wish he would pick one or the other. Are they adults DSP or are they kids and don't know what Hexen is? I don't really care which one he picks, just pick one and go with it. Quit flip-flopping all of the time.
So in the 1990s, a lot of first-person shooters came out. You had your Wolfenstein 3D, which started the craze, killing Nazis and stuff like that. But then you had Duke Nukem 3D, Doom, and all of that. And then you started having spin-offs. And one of the spin-offs was called Hexen. And the selling point of Hexen was that you weren't using guns. You were using magic. So you'd use like a magic wand. You'd be shooting like electricity or fireballs or ice, poison, you know, cool things like that. You could summon, I think you could summon monsters too that would help you. I can't remember exactly because I haven't played it in 100 years. But I remember playing it and loving this game. Because like essentially if you like fantasy, if you like Dungeons and Dragons, if you like Lord of the Rings, if you like that kind of stuff, you're going to love Hexen because it really was the first person game with mass combat that wasn't just unloading ammo into everything around you. Okay?
I don't know why, but I really struggle to imagine DSP playing any of these retro style shooters back in the day. Just something about his personality now makes it really difficult for me to believe that he actually had any fun doing that. But he says if you love D&D and Lord of the Rings, you're going to like Hexen? What the hell does that even mean? Just because it's medieval style, it's got magic? That's such a vague and general concept. I really don't understand how you can say that if you like one, you're gonna like the other. Oh dude, you love water? You're gonna love this Kool-Aid. Drink it. Go on, drink it. I'm just not convinced that that's how it works because they are so different. Also, if these people have never heard about Hexen, how are you going to sit here and compare it to Wolfenstein or Doom like they're going to know what those are either? You're sitting here pig-splaining Hexen like you're not going to have to also sit here and pig-splain those two as well.
So I loved it. And when I saw the footage of Immortals of Aveum, I said, this game almost looks like the spiritual successor to Hexen, except now you've got more RPG elements, you've got modernized gameplay mechanics and graphics, so it kind of made sense, it looked interesting. My problem was when we were watching all this trailer footage of it, you know, preview footage of it, it was called Immortals of Aveum. Alright? Right off the bat. Does that name appeal to you in any way? Immortals of Aveum. Immortal. So it was like gods, or people with superpowers. Kind of reminds me of that Marvel movie, Eternals. And we all know how good Eternals did, right? It was one of the worst performing Marvel movies of all time. So, when you hear that name, does it catch you? Does it interest you in the game in any way, shape, or form? No. It's like a real generic name that doesn't really ring any interest in the game, correct?
Well, I would imagine that's why people tell you not to judge a book by its cover, DSP, because sometimes the name and sometimes the thing that they throw right in front of you isn't actually going to catch your eye. It's the content inside that might. So if you enjoyed the gameplay, if you thought it looked cool, you thought it looked like something that you wanted to play, why didn't you look into it? Why didn't you try and figure out what it was about and maybe play it on your stream since nobody else apparently did? If it did as poor as you're letting on, then it sounds like you could have been doing something other streamers weren't doing. You could have been playing a game that nobody else was playing and brought in in that style of audience. But instead you decided to write it off because it had a generic sounding name to you, because it reminded you of some terrible Marvel movie that you didn't like? I don't really understand what that has to do with this game. Just seems like a weird comparison to make, especially because I've never even heard of this Marvel movie or show or whatever the hell it was. You're sitting here telling us the name is bad because Immortals reminds you of gods, but you don't even know if that's what the game's about. You didn't look into it, you just instantly wrote it off. Don't get me wrong, I wrote the game off too, but that has nothing to do with it sounding generic or even seeing the gameplay, and everything to do with EA and their business practices. I think that that's justifiable. You're just lazy. You just couldn't be bothered to look into a video game that you could be playing for your business.
So what is Immortals of Aveum about? Do you even have any idea? When you see Wolfenstein 3D, you're like, okay, it's a war against the Nazis. When you see Doom, oh, it's a war against invading, hell demons, right? When you look at Immortals of Aveum, you don't know what the fuck this game is. You're like, what is this? Gods? Otherworldly creature? Is it fantasy? Is it actually magic in medieval times? No, because it looks like space age, but is it space age then? It's just this weird mishmash. And I hate to say it, we've kind of seen it before.
So you've seen it before, but you don't know what it is. Make that make sense. But he's still sitting here comparing it to Wolfenstein and Doom, these games that have been around forever, these IPs that have established lore and characters and themes. This is a brand new IP. Of course you don't know what it is, DSP. That's why you're supposed to look into it. You're supposed to get excited about a company that's going out of their way to make a new IP. It's not just the same story again and again. It's not the same themes. It's not the same environments. It's something new and different, and you're supposed to look into it if you're interested in it. But just like his gameplay, he can't be bothered to be curious. He can't be bothered to go out of his way and actually indulge his curiosity. He needs everything spoon-fed to him. I guess during the showcase where he saw the gameplay, they were supposed to give him the entire plot synopsis so that he could be interested. Seems kind of stupid to me, but that's the kind of guy that we're dealing with.
There's been other games that have been like this that have also flopped, this kind of style. What was the big budget game that came out around the early days of like Xbox 360 and PS3, and it was supposed to be this giant epic, and it flopped miserably, so they never made any more. They were supposed to make like a sequels, and they never made it. I can't remember what it was called. I've told you guys about it because I bought it and I played through it, and I found it very grindy, but I beat it once and I actually played it again. I can't remember what the hell the name of the game was. It's ancient at this point, so you guys probably wouldn't even remember it. But it reminded me of that because that game had like magic, but it was also futuristic. So it didn't make sense. It was weird hybrid games. Like, well, you don't even know what they're going for. Is it old? Is it new? You don't even know, right? And that's really what Immortals of Aveum looks like to me. A game that doesn't really have a unique identity. And because of that, you have a bad name, right? And you don't have a unique identity. So the only way that... yes, it was Too Human. Hobo X got it. Too Human. When I see Immortals of Aveum, it reminds me of Too Human. Go look at that game, Too Human. It looks very similar in style. Now, gameplay elements, no, but the style, like the art design, looks very similar to me. And I was like, it didn't work back then, so why would you try this again in 2023,
Just because something doesn't work the first time, DSP, doesn't mean that other people can't try it later on. I mean, imagine all of the inventions that were created that wouldn't have been created had they just given up the first few times that it didn't work. And let me remind you that he doesn't know anything about the game. He's seen the gameplay, said it looked interesting, and then immediately wrote it off. So how does he know what the art style actually is? How does he know anything about the world? He's seen a few minutes of gameplay and immediately was like, oh, I don't get it, so it's just not for me, I guess. And I'm pretty sure that the gameplay he saw, if my memory serves me correct, was a benchmark test for the PC port of the game on a DSP Reacts. So it's actually just gameplay out of context with no story elements. Of course he didn't understand what was going on. Of course he was confused. It's just random gameplay. Also, big ups to Human, I guess. It was kind of a weird thing for him to bring up, a little obscure style reference. I never played the game, but I saw the case all the time when I went to the GameStops back in the day, looking for games. So again, big ups.
So anyway, so what's going to be the hook of this game then? Well, hopefully they market it well, right? Hopefully this game is marketed very well so people will know exactly what it is, so it doesn't have an identity crisis, and people will check it out, especially if they're saying they invested $125 million, AAA studio assets and everything to it. So what do they proceed to do? They literally don't market it. Like, I didn't even hear about it until you guys told me it was coming out. I didn't even know when it was coming out. And they released it literally between Baldur's Gate 3 and Starfield.
If you ask me, that is kind of a bad business move to release your game right between those two. You are kind of shooting yourself in the foot there. But I also don't expect these companies to constantly be coordinating their game release schedules with each other, because they are competition after all, at least to some extent. DSP, on the other hand, very much does think that these companies should be coordinating. He's constantly going on about how many RPGs are releasing so close together and how they're competing with each other and nobody's gonna have time to play all of these lengthy RPGs. And he did the same thing with fighting games.
So Baldur's Gate 3 comes out, all the hype's about Baldur's Gate 3, and now what's the next thing? Well, we gotta see if Starfield can live up to the hype, because Baldur's Gate 3 has far exceeded expectations. Can Starfield live up to the hype? Literally, the discussion of those two games erased this game from existence. Like, no one even knew it happened. And by the way, they charged $70 for it. For a new IP that no one knew about, wasn't advertised, sounded boring in name. What did you think would happen? Did you think people would just, on a whim, buy your $70 game just because you created it?
I mean, yeah, that is what most companies expect you to do. They created the product, they do expect you to pay for it. That's how these businesses work, DSP. I don't know why you're confused about that. But he does kind of have a point. It's a $70 game, which if you ask me is always a scam. I'm not paying $70 for a game, get out of here. And it's sandwiched in between two much larger IPs. And I'd say that the marketing definitely wasn't there because I didn't hear all that much about it, if anything at all. Maybe it's because it was a new IP and they didn't want to double down too much on the marketing for it, but they could have done something. I've mentioned this previously though, DSP has always got this smugness to him that makes you want to root against him. Anytime I find myself agreeing with something that DSP said, I feel like I'm in the wrong all of a sudden. I try not to be a contrarian to DSP just to be a contrarian because I don't think that that's a good thing to do. But boy is it hard when you're dealing with the guy. Because even when he's right, you want him to be wrong. He just makes you want to argue with him.
That's not how it works. See, I think EA is really in this old school mindset. EA is thinking of the old days when there wasn't a lot of competition, right? So because of that, the EA would release a giant game and everyone would flock to it and buy it just because it was EA. Everyone would say, oh, Electronic Arts, we know them. They're the ones who make all these big high profile games. So every time one comes out, we know to trust them, right? So we know to buy it. And that's just not the case anymore. Now we have so many AAA studios pumping out games at the same time. There's too many to all play at the same time. You've also got smaller studios. Like, let's be honest, Larian, was anyone looking at them as like big AAA style? No, no one thought that. Now, with Baldur's Gate 3, everyone's looking at them like, holy shit, what an amazing job they did with this game that came out of nowhere. We never thought Baldur's Gate 3 would be that good. And, it ended up being Game of the Year, right?
I think that you're discrediting Larian quite a bit, DSP. You played Divinity Original Sin 2, and I know that you didn't like it, but it is kind of a great game if that's your thing. In fact, people like the original Divinity Original Sin as well, so they're kind of batting 3-0. Just because, once again, you wrote them off for little to no reason doesn't mean that other people don't have expectations for these studios. But he does that quite often with smaller studios. He immediately writes them off because they are not some AAA style studio. Just because they don't have some big-ass publisher behind them, DSP doesn't actually take their games seriously. He's not interested in playing them. The guy who's claiming all the time that he's fighting for the little guy and he's rooting for underdogs and he's one of them, loves to support these mega corporations that are constantly pushing out schlock. But when it comes to these indie studios that are pushing out artistically pleasing games with a focus that are actually good, he can't be bothered to play them. And I know that we talk about this quite frequently, but it just bothers me so much that he tries to claim that he takes this stance against these big publishers, but he supports them the entire way all the time. And even when given the opportunity to support a smaller studio, to support these indie games, he can't be bothered.
So what's happening now, not only do you have this oversaturation of the market, too many games at once, you've also got too many AAA style games all competing for the same market space, and now you've got other studios that are coming out of the woodwork actually making comparable experiences to the AAA ones, but it's not the same bloat that you're expecting. I mean, Baldur's Gate 3 has made everyone look ashamed, right? Game devs literally came out after Baldur's Gate 3 released and said, don't think every game we make is going to be like that. That's unfair. Well, no, that should be fair. That's your competition. That's the new golden standard. And if you can't live up to it, then don't make games.
And once again, unfortunately, I find myself agreeing with DSP. If you're not willing to compete in the industry simply because you don't want to make better products, then you don't have any business making video games in the industry. You should be constantly trying to set the bar higher and higher and put out a better product. That is how healthy competition works. But it is nothing but irony hearing that from DSP. All of these other content creators and video game streamers are out here doing buku numbers, and DSP is just being left in the dust day after day, failing to adapt, failing to make any of the changes to his content that he needs to make to compete with them. When everybody moved to direct capture, he was years behind them. When everybody became an interactive live style streamer, he was years behind them. Here's an idea, DSP. If you can't compete in the industry simply because you're not willing to make a better product, then you have no business in the industry making content. You need to better yourself. People aren't just going to show up to your content because you simply made the content, right? But of course, DSP's just a different breed, man. He'll get exactly that. People will continue to support him and show up to his streams despite him giving them nothing in return. Nothing but snorts and bags.
Because what's going to happen now is, what do they say? The cream rises to the top. So the good games now are the ones that are going to get featured, and games that are just shovelware or mid experiences are never going to get played anymore. Now, that wasn't the case back in the day, because back in the day, there wasn't as much competition. But EA still thinks it's 2010.
I have no idea why he's pretending that like in 2010 there was no video games coming out and that you were really tough on selection. I was playing video games in 2010. I was playing games before that even, and there was always tons of games that I could be playing. I never was short on games. I just don't know what reality he was living in, because even if new games weren't coming out all of the time, you don't have to play a new game. I'm sure there's tons of old games that you didn't play that you could have been playing. But there was absolutely games coming out all of the time in 2010. I don't know what he's talking about.
EA literally thinks we're in a situation where any game they put out will immediately sell, and they don't have to put effort into it. They don't have to market it. It'll just be good. That's not reality anymore. You have to work hard now to get your game noticed and to do something that will go viral on social media and get memed and people will want to buy and play. You have to work for it.
And all of this still applies to DSP. It's absolutely insane to me that he understands this when it comes to EA, when it comes to video games, but he can't understand that when it comes to his own content. DSP, you have to be funny. You have to put the effort in. You have to make memes. You have to be relatable. You have to do anything to be entertaining. So close to self-awareness, but always still so far.
And the other funny part is, you never know when a game that you had no clue was coming will come out and all of a sudden take over the gaming landscape. Take a look at Palworld. Did anyone see that one coming? Did you really think Palworld was going to sell that many millions of copies and be the only talk of gaming for about 2 weeks? Of course not. But that's what happens now in modern gaming. We're in a different landscape, a different climate, and a different world. This is not 2010, but EA thinks it's 2010.
Coming from the guy who's constantly talking about his 4th place Evo win, how he used to be popular on YouTube, and back in 2010 he used to work at a helicopter company until he was let go.
So they put all this money into this game, they don't advertise, they put it out at the worst possible time between two ginormous competing AAA releases. It's a new IP, they don't give you any reason to buy it, they don't even explain what the fuck it is. I watched the gameplay trailer presentations, I didn't know what the game was. I was confused, right?
And definitely some of that is a failure on EA's part. There's no doubt about that. They're supposed to make you interested. They're supposed to convey a clear message about the game to you to make you interested and maybe even go look at it later. And if they didn't do that, again, that's a failure on their part. But when he's seen the gameplay, he said that it looked interesting. He wasn't exactly turned off by the gameplay. So why did he then not go out of his way to look into the game? Because a game is more about the gameplay than anything else, if you ask me. I mean, that is why it's a video game after all, because it's about the gameplay. The story, the graphics, all of that other shit be damned.
And now the game comes out, no one buys it, it flops horribly. Oh, well, this is our justification that single player games are failing. No, idiots. It's a justification that your management is terrible and your company is now an archaic dinosaur in the realm of game development. That's what this is evidence of.
And I just want to point out that he needs to remove dinosaur from his vocabulary for at least a little while, because that's a word that he kept using when he was threatening to take away gameplay on his channel. He kept saying that he didn't want to be a dinosaur like back in the day. He doesn't want to be a dinosaur. I don't know if that was in the clip that I looked at on the channel or if it was later on in the segment that didn't get captured. But yeah, just using dinosaur too frequently, you'd think that he's like an artistic little boy or something.
There's nothing wrong with a game like Immortals of Aveum if timed right, marketed right, and actually released in a window where people will check it out. But you're idiots, and you run your company horribly, and you're running it into the ground by only relying on microtransactions on sports games. You know, this is just sad because you take a look at companies like Valve. Valve was an outstanding game developer making cream of the crop, top of the line AAA games, right? I mean, shit, the Half-Life series, the Portal series, Team Fortress 2, among others that they were pumping out hit after hit after hit. Then they released Steam. Yeah, we don't want to make games anymore. We're just going to make money on Steam, right?
DSP really underestimates the impact that Steam and Valve as a whole have had on the video game industry in general, and especially on PC. There is a reason that I refuse to use those third-party launchers that I was talking about earlier in the video. It's because they provide a subpar experience to what is Steam. The UI is always worse. It always takes so much longer to load. The sales are always worse. The game selection is always worse. You can say whatever you want about Steam and Valve and the decisions that they've made throughout the years, but goddammit, if they didn't make the best PC game launcher in history, I don't know who did. And to me, that's far more important than whatever franchises they could be working on to this day. I like some of their franchises, not all of them. I'm not the biggest Half-Life fan. I'm not the biggest Team Fortress fan. But if I had to give up every Valve franchise so that I could continue to use Steam every single day, I would do it. I would do it 10 times over. It doesn't matter to me. But I'll get back to the video and quit shilling for Steam. There's a very weird shill segment. I like Steam. They're not perfect, but I like them a lot.
Rockstar Games, making a wide variety of amazing games. The Grand Theft Auto series, the Bully series, the Red Dead series, Midnight Club, and other things that diversified. They released GTA 5 Online. Oh, well, we don't have to do anything else anymore. Cancel all DLCs, cancel all other games. Well, we'll release Red Dead 2 because we were already far enough into development. Everything else just delay and just keep making GTA 5 content. So what's happening is these companies are falling in line to what's easy rather than what's creative, artistic, or actually good for gaming. They don't care anymore. They just want easy mode profits.
And I'll say it once more, this applies to DSP as well. He's not interested in making better content. He's not interested in what's better for his content as a whole. He just wants easy mode profit. But in the instance of Rockstar and Valve and all of these other big game companies, it actually makes more sense because they have investors and shareholders that they have to please. They have to make money. That is the business that they run. Every business is in the business of making money. But DSP, on the other hand, he doesn't have shareholders. He doesn't have investors. I know that he treats the dents as if they are when he does his weird boardroom meetings, but he doesn't actually have to answer to anybody or make anybody money. As long as he can pay his bills, he doesn't have to make any more money than that, really. But of course, that Scopely bill is always growing and it's always on the horizon.
And when EA does something like this, right, you could tell that the truth is all they want to do is be Rockstar. They want to find that golden formula where they have to do absolute minimum work and maximize profits. Because if you're going to use Immortals of Aveum as a scapegoat, instead of as a shining example of why your management of your company sucks, all you're doing is refusing to look in the mirror, and instead, you just want the easy money.
That's what every single company wants, DSP. No company wants to do any more work than they have to make the maximum amount of money. That's part of being in a business, isn't it? It's up to the customers, the consumers of the product, to not stand for that, to not continue to give them this money that they want so desperately. You're supposed to make them work for it. But of course, the thing that he said once again applies to him and his business. If you're going to use detractors and trolls and Argentinians as a scapegoat, instead of a shining example of how you need to improve the quality of your content so people are willing to watch it and pay for it, then all you're doing is failing to look in the mirror, and instead all you want is easy money.
So just fucking go into pachinko, right? Do what Konami did. Turn all your IPs Madden pachinko, right? Madden slots.
Konami?
Right? Do what Konami did.
Yeah, I guess big ups Konami.
Do it, fucking do it, do it. Every franchise, just fucking sell it out and go do gambling and you know, just do that. Because I'm tired of this fucking bullshit. And you know what? You know what? That'll actually be better overall for gaming. You want to know why? Because the market will stop being so saturated with crap games with microtransactions attached to them.
I don't think that EA would have as easy a time getting into games like pachinko and slots as those Japanese style studios did, because gambling culture is just a little different in the US, DSP. I'm not quite sure if you're aware of this, but it's just a little different. Also, the regulations are way different. It just doesn't seem like it would be all that easy of a switch to do, you know? But DSP's sitting here talking about microtransactions in video games and being oversaturated with them. Like his favorite game in the world isn't a Candy Crush clone with a bunch of sweaty men in it. He's basically the king of gacha games, but is sitting here complaining about microtransactions.
The less crap games we can have to free up the market share to other games that actually tried, that's what we need. So get the crap out of there. Let EA go make their money elsewhere in a market share where actual gamers don't give two fucks about them. Leave us alone and let us enjoy gaming. I'd much rather have game devs be employed by a company that cares about the product they're putting out than the amount of money that the product generates. So that's just sad, because I guarantee you that Immortals of Aveum probably isn't that bad, but no one will ever play it because EA just didn't give two fucks.
And this is exactly what I was talking about earlier. DSP, if you're interested in the game, go play the goddamn game. Just because they didn't market it well and it's not a hot new release doesn't mean that you can't still go play it if you're interested in playing it. This is just the most bass-backward logic I've ever heard. Sitting here acting as though he wants to play the game and EA took it off the storefronts when that's just not the case.
They thought, oh, it's just a guaranteed that, you know, it's just gonna sell. No, it's called effort. You don't put it in anymore. So that's why your game tanked, because you're idiots. Not because the game devs did a bad job. The game looked decent in the game previews and things that I saw, but it had no identity, no marketing, and you released it at the wrong time of the year, and then you blame the game. No, it's you. You're the problem. How can you be in charge of a company, have things constantly failing under your watch, and then blame others? You're the one in charge. You're literally the one who made all that happen. How do you blame others? What? What is going on with these fucking people? Anyway.
And of course, we couldn't get through the rest of the video without more of DSP's criticism or advice being just as easily applied to him. You're the one who owns and operates this business, this YouTube channel, and you constantly have things going wrong under your watch and then you're blaming other people. You're the one in charge. You're literally the one. How are you blaming other people? Amazing. Simply amazing. But that's going to be it for today's video. Big ups to everybody who watched the video, especially if you made it this far. And a special shout out to all of my members. I really do appreciate you guys. Thank you so much. Hopefully I'll catch all of you guys in the next video, but until then, make sure that you check out other detractor channels and dive deeper into that. Snore tags.